Hello, and welcome to our build guide video. One of Hierophant's specializations is an unorthodox dependency on mana. Thanks to this ascendancy you will gain bonus energy shield, damage, and area of effect based on your investments into mana. It also grants you permanent endurance and power charges, as well as an enhanced effect for the arcane surge. You will trigger the Manabond when you hit an enemy with the Mjölner. At a lower budget, you can use the Prism Guardian Shield, which will allow you to use more auras by reserving your life at higher efficiency, but ultimately the Squire grants you much more damage by providing 3 extra support gems to your main skill. This build heavily relies on strength and intelligence to scale damage and survivability. On top of the regular benefits of those attributes, you will gain additional spell damage and critical strike chance. The mana is also a very important way to boost your damage and energy shield. The Indigon increases your spell damage the more mana you spend. To not die from chaos damage, we use the Ivory Tower with the unique property that causes chaos damage to be taken from mana before life. Lastly, the Arcane Cloak cost is equal to 64% of your maximum mana, and it grants you an enormous bonus to damage and protects your energy shield from incoming harm based on the amount of mana spent. Manabond scales its damage with your missing unreserved mana, so the more you can accumulate it, the more base damage you will deal. It has to be unreserved. To use auras you will reserve your life instead. By socketing it inside of Mjölner, you can trigger that skill over 4 times per second. Your energy shield can easily reach well over 10,000, while your arcane cloak is capable of preventing a significant portion of damage. Energy shield regeneration and leech are very efficient here since they are based on your max energy shield percentages. The damage is great, but the build lacks the movement speed to be called fast. It is however very steady as nothing can stop you. The build offers a very powerful burst of damage. You are dependent on the arcane cloak uptime and mana regeneration in that regard. Most of the items needed for the build can be acquired on a low budget, but it will feel lackluster without proper investments. There are quite a lot of unique items that are necessary for the build to run. Some are vital for the build mechanics itself, such as the Mjölner or Ivory Tower, while others are needed for the power they grant, ensuring you will get comfortable amounts of damage and tankiness. The Mjölner triggers Manabond on hit with Cyclone every quarter of a second without any cost. It also increases your lightning damage. The baseline item is very cheap, so you should look for useful corruption implicits here, such as the Onslaught on kill. Indigon plays a huge role in increasing your DPS. As you spend mana you gain more damage, but your skills grow in mana cost too. After using Arcane Cloak your damage is at its highest. Having enchant for the Arcane Cloak would be very beneficial to have here. The Squire Shield allows you to apply 3 more support gems to your Manabond, which means about 90% more damage than the usual Mjölner setup. It is the most expensive item in the build and can wait until you get the remaining necessary pieces together. Prism Guardian is a cheap alternative that allows you to have additional auras through much better reservation efficiency. It also grants plenty of elemental resistances. The Zealotry aura can make up for some of the damage loss compared to the Squire. Besides the obviously good stats it provides, the Ivory Tower is also necessary to protect you from chaos damage. Just be sure you have a lot of spare mana when dealing with chaos damage. Shaper's Touch grants you a lot of accuracy ratings and increased evasion rating from intelligence, while strength increases your energy shield and mana. Try to get useful corrupted implicit such as increased base critical strike chance for spells. Astramentus is an incredibly efficient amulet for this build. It grants tons of attributes and takes care of your dexterity so you don't have to waste affix somewhere else. Use intrinsic catalysts to boost attributes even further. The Healthy Mind Jewel alone is already good, but you can get even more mana from it by putting it in a socket next to Instability and taking Cruel Preparation. It will convert the not-so-useful life nodes into mana. Split Personality grants tons of raw stats. The modifiers to look for are intelligence, strength, and maybe mana or accuracy rating depending on your needs. You can place 2 of them on a cluster jewel next to the Eldritch Battery Keystone for maximum effectiveness. The Forbidden Flesh and Flame Jewels are a necessary combination to scale your critical strike chance and make out the most of your attributes by borrowing the Righteous Providence notable from Inquisitor Ascendancy, which grants you critical strike chance based on your strength and intelligence. Lightning Penetration from the Wrath Aura is probably the best option for a mod you can find on your Watcher's Eye. You can also get tons of Energy Shield from the Clarity Aura mods. You will have to cover lots of missing elemental resistances and attributes through your rare items. Critical Strike Multiplier is also very important, as it's the best way to scale damage here. While Energy Shield is indeed the base of your defense, you should prioritize mana, which also grants your Energy Shield, but on top of that increases your damage. You can get lots of movement speed, attributes, and resistances on your rare boots. You should also get cooldown recovery rate, which can be easily accomplished with Eldritch Influence. You can also get a brittle ground effect from them, which will be easily activated when you use Cyclone directly at your enemy. A Stygian Vice or Crystal Belt with mana, elemental resistances, and some mods that grant you attributes is a good enough choice. You should look for a Hunter-influenced one with an affix for increased attributes. It can also boost your cooldown recovery rate, but remember to check if you can speed up your attack speed with Cyclone enough to make it worthwhile. You can use a rare amulet, but it will need to be nearly perfect to outperform Astramentus. It should grant you a percentage increase of your attributes, critical strike multiplier, lightning penetration, and obviously mana. It needs to be a double influenced item to grant 2 bonuses for your attributes at once. Your rare rings are much simpler. Aim for attributes, elemental resistances, mana, and energy shield. You can also get some critical strike multipliers or accuracy rating here. Unfortunately, attributes collide with resistance modifiers, so it might be hard to get them all in one. On your rare jewels, try to look for affixes with maximum energy shield, elemental resistances, attributes, or maximum mana. It is also a very good source of critical strike multiplier for your spells. Abyss Jewel should be very similar to regular rare jewels. It should provide all the usual affixes. You can also get a bit of accuracy rating or cooldown recovery rate here. You can also look for a corrupted blood immunity from the implicit obtained with the Vol Orb. The Storm Drinker is a great source of energy shield leech. The scintillating idea is pretty much an obligatory notable since it increases your maximum mana and grants you lightning resistance penetration. The disorienting display is pretty useful too, as it blinds nearby enemies. If you're fighting against opponents dealing mostly chaos damage and you run out of mana, the Coruscating Elixir Flask can save your life, as chaos damage won't go through your energy shield during its effect. It is rather easy to sustain during mapping. Fights with the chaos-themed bosses will require special attention. The Bottled Faith greatly increases your critical strike chance and damage against enemies standing on the consecrated ground. You can use enchant to make it even more powerful at the cost of reduced charge generation, as you should use it only against the strongest enemies. Other suggested flasks include a Quicksilver Flask with increased attack speed or critical strike chance, the Jade Flask with increased evasion rating bonus, and a Silver Flask with reduction of curse effects on you. Manabond is the main source of damage. It primarily scales with your mana. It deals lightning damage in an area around the character when triggered by Mjölner. You will have to cut out the last 3 support gems from this setup if you don't have the Squire yet. If you need every ounce of damage, you can swap the Awakened Area of Effect for the Arcane Surge support. Arc is a great clearing skill with mediocre damage, but high enough to take down most enemies. It will automatically trigger and target while you channel Cyclone. Cyclone is used for its very high frequency of hits. You will need some accuracy rating to ensure you can actually hit enemies in order to trigger the Manabond. If you can get enough accuracy from other sources than support gem, you can use the Anomalous Mana Leech. The Arcane Cloak will give your Cyclone enough damage for it to be effective. The Shaper Touch Gloves greatly increase your evasion rating, but you will need some flat amount of evasion to benefit from it. The Grace Aura greatly serves this purpose. The Clarity is an aura that regenerates your mana at a faster rate. It also allows you to benefit from very powerful Watcher's Eye modifiers. The Precision is an aura used to get more accuracy and critical strike chance, helping you to deal damage more consistently. All those auras should be linked with the Arrogant support to reserve your life instead of mana. 2 of them have a flat amount of reservation, which makes it easier to balance. The Wrath is an offensive aura that grants you a lot of lightning damage with your spells. If you use the Prism Guardian, you can also use the Zealotry to boost your critical strike chance and spell damage. In both variants, you should link the Wrath with the Eternal Blessing support to keep your mana intact and still benefit from this powerful aura. The Arcane Cloak spends 64% of your mana to create protective shielding. It also grants additional spell damage. The magnitude of both effects depends on the amount of mana sacrificed upon use. Sigil of Power creates a circle on the ground. As you spend mana while standing on it, it grows more powerful, granting you additional lightning damage and reducing the damage you receive. To boost their effects, you should link it with enhanced support. The Arcane Cloak cooldown starts to recover once its duration ends, so if you prefer shorter but more frequent bursts, you can skip this support gem. You can use the Frost Blink without ever stopping channeling the Cyclone. It is a rather short blink that leaves chilled ground in both locations. The cooldown gets significantly reduced if you use it nearby enemies. The Conductivity is a curse spell that significantly lowers lightning resistances of affected foes. The anomalous quality causes it to lower them even more. In the second act of the campaign, killing all bandits and gaining 2 bonus passive skill points from Aramir grants more benefits than any of their offers. The Pantheon's choices are highly flexible, but for general mapping we recommend using the Soul of Lunaris, which grants you additional physical damage mitigation and some movement speed for your Cyclone. As for the minor Pantheon power, it is best to use the Soul of Shikari, as it grants a lot of defensive power against chaos damage, which can be very dangerous. To no surprise, the passive tree focuses mostly on maximum mana, energy shield, and attributes. You will also pick up a few critical strike bonuses, life reservation efficiency from the Aura Mastery, and a lightning mastery that grants you lots of shock effectiveness sourced from your mana investments. You will also pick up 2 very important keystones. The Pain Attunement grants you tons of spell damage if you reserve over 50% of your maximum life, but you should also pick the Mastery, which grants you the light radius based on your energy shield instead. The second keystone is the Iron Will, which also grants tons of spell damage, but this time it is based on your strength. The passive tree scales very well in the endgame, but for leveling purposes, you should try to pick up nearby spell and elemental damage passives to greatly speed up the campaign. You will get plenty of respect points from the quests anyway. The Hierophant Ascendancy also grants you tons of damage and other utility. You will have a permanent arcane surge and 4 power charges to boost your damage at all times. The Transfiguration of Mind makes your heavy mana investments even more worthwhile, while the Sanctuary of Thought gives you lots of energy shield and area of effect. You will use 2 large cluster jewels, which will grant you very powerful notables, and even more jewel sockets. Small and medium clusters are quite bad for this build. It is better to use regular jewels there. That would be all that you need to enjoy this build. We encourage you to leave a like, subscribe, or ask questions in the comments. Have a good day, and see you in the next video.